I'll never forget that day. The sky was quiet, the kind of still gray that makes the house feel even emptier. I was holding my phone, smiling to myself, rehearsing what I'd say. "So, honey, when's the big day?" I asked, trying to sound cheerful. There was a pause on the other end. Then my daughter-in-law's voice, calm and polite. "Oh, we actually got married yesterday. It was a small ceremony. Only for special people." Only for special people. Those words hit like a slow-moving blade. I froze, gripping the phone tighter. My son, Ethan, didn't say a word. He was standing behind her. I could hear the faint rustle of his jacket, his nervous breathing. Special people? Wasn't I the one who paid their rent when he lost his job? The one who covered their groceries, their furniture, even their wedding deposits? Every month, I wired money from my small savings, just until you get back on your feet, I'd say. And yet, here I was, not special enough to witness my only son's wedding. I hung up before my voice could crack. The silence afterwards was heavy, like the air itself had stopped moving. In the corner of my closet hung the pale blue dress I'd bought for that day. Soft lace, tiny pearl buttons. Next to it, my wedding gift. All useless now. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the half-empty cup of coffee. The smell had gone bitter. Outside, the neighbors' wind chimes clinked like laughter from another world, one where mothers mattered. For years, I told myself love meant giving without limits. That's what my husband used to say before he passed. Family always comes first, Helen. But as I sat there, the words "only for special people" echoed again and again, each time duller, heavier, colder. Maybe this was what disappointment sounded like. Quiet, polite, and final. And beneath the ache, something else began to stir. It wasn't sadness anymore, not heartbreak. It was anger, sharp, unfamiliar, and alive.
A week went by. The silence between us grew like dust. Soft, invisible, but everywhere. No calls from Ethan, no messages. I told myself it was better that way. Let them live their special life. Then, one afternoon, my phone buzzed. "Ashley!" Her voice was sugary sweet, the kind that used to fool me. "Hi, Mom. Hope you're doing okay. Listen, the landlord's being a total jerk. He says rent's due today. Could you maybe send it over, just for this month?" For a second, I almost said yes. That old habit of rescuing kicked in like muscle memory. But then I looked around my quiet kitchen, the same kitchen where I once counted their bills and skipped my own medication to help them. My hand trembled, but my voice stayed calm. "No, Ashley," I said. "I only help the special ones." Silence. I could almost hear her blinking on the other end. "What does that even mean?" she snapped, her sweetness cracking. I smiled, though she couldn't see it. I said, "You remember your wedding? The one I wasn't special enough to attend?" She gasped, that little intake of air when someone realizes the rules just changed. Wow, so that's how it's gonna be. That's exactly how it's gonna be. And I hung up. I stood there, my heart pounding, feeling a strange lightness in my chest. For years, I thought love meant giving until you had nothing left. But maybe love could also mean stopping. Outside, the autumn wind brushed against the windows. The air smelled of rain and something new, something that felt a little like freedom. That night, I made dinner for one. The table felt too big, but the quiet didn't hurt this time. I lit a candle, just because I wanted to. Not for anyone else, just for me. And for the first time in years, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned.
That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with a pen, a notebook, and a cup of coffee that went cold long before I finished the math. For the first time, I wanted to see the truth. Not the story I'd been telling myself about helping my kids, but the real hard numbers. 3 years of rent, $500 every month, $18,000. Groceries and utilities, maybe $250 a month? That's another $9,000. Birthdays, Christmas, anniversaries, at least $3,000. Car repairs, medical bills, the emergency honeymoon fund, $3,500. Total, $33,500. Gone. Money I'd saved from my late husband's pension, the money I was supposed to use for my own old age. I looked at the total and it didn't even make me angry at first. It made me tired. Tired of being the dependable one, the fixer, the wallet with a heartbeat. I thought about Ethan's little boy smile when he was 5, how he'd hold my hand and tell me I was his favorite person. When did that love turn into this cold entitlement? When did "Mom, I love you" become "Mom, can you send the money today?" I closed the notebook and whispered to the empty kitchen, "No more. No more saving them from their own choices. No more buying love that never existed." For the first time, I realized something no one tells you about motherhood. Sometimes the hardest part isn't letting your child grow up. It's accepting who they became. I went to bed just before dawn, feeling strangely calm. The numbers were out of my head and on paper, where they belonged. $33,500. That was the price of my illusion. And as I drifted to sleep, one thought echoed quietly in my mind, a new kind of promise to myself. From now on, Helen, you come first. It was a gray Thursday morning when the peace I'd started to build began to crack. I was watering my little backyard garden, the one Ethan used to play in, when my phone rang again. This time, it wasn't Ashley, it was Ethan. His name still had power over me. My chest tightened before I even answered. "Hey, Mom," he said, too casually. "We're gonna stop by for a bit. Need to clear a few things up." Before I could respond, he'd already hung up. Not ask, not can we come. We are going to stop by. I stood there for a moment, the hose dripping at my feet, that old familiar dread spreading through my stomach. They still thought they could just walk into my home like it was theirs? An hour later, a car door slammed outside, then another. I peeked through the curtains. Ethan, Ashley, and a third man I didn't recognize. Sharp suit, briefcase, that professional coldness you can smell from across the room. I took a deep breath, smoothed my shirt, and opened the door before they could knock. Ethan looked frustrated already. "Mom, can we come in?" "You're already here," I said quietly. "Might as well." They stepped inside like it was some kind of intervention. Ashley didn't even pretend to be friendly this time. She went straight to the point. "Renat, this is Mr. Fisher. He's a family attorney. We just want to make sure everything's okay with your finances." "My finances?" I repeated, letting the words hang in the air. "Yes," Ethan said, looking uncomfortable. "You've been acting different lately. cutting off payments, ignoring our calls. We're worried about you." I laughed. I didn't mean to, but it came out sharp, like glass breaking. "You're worried about my money, Ethan, not about me." Mr. Fisher opened his briefcase and took out a folder. "Mrs. Richter, your children believe your recent behavior might indicate cognitive decline. They're considering applying for legal guardianship." "Legal guardianship?" I interrupted, my voice louder than I expected. Ashley shifted, pretending to look concerned. "Mom, please, don't make this harder. We're just trying to help." I walked to the table, picked up the folder and flipped it open. Power of attorney documents, ready for my signature. I looked up at them and felt something break free inside me. A kind of anger that didn't shake anymore. It stood tall. "You want my house," I said quietly. "You want my savings. You want control. That's not love. That's greed with a family name." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Mom, this is crazy." "No," I said, closing the folder and dropping it into the trash. "What's crazy is raising a son who thinks love is measured in rent payments." For a moment, nobody spoke. Even the air in the room felt heavy. Then I pointed to the door. "Get out." "Mom!" "Get out." They hesitated, stunned that I wasn't trembling, that I wasn't crying this time. And then they left. No apologies, no hugs, just the sound of the door closing, solid and final. When the silence settled again, I sat down and let out a long breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My hands were still shaking, but not from fear, from relief. For the first time in years, I wasn't being used. I was defending myself. Outside, the sun finally broke through the clouds, and I swear it felt like it was shining just for me.
The next morning, the sunlight hit my bedroom in a way it hadn't in years. It felt clean, sharp, like the world was reminding me I was still here. I got up slowly, half expecting the old heaviness in my chest to return, that familiar guilt that always came after saying no. But it didn't. Instead, there was a strange calm, quiet, solid. I made coffee and walked to the bathroom. The mirror met me with that same tired face I'd avoided for too long. Wrinkles deepened by years of worry, eyes dulled by disappointment. But behind all that, I saw something new. A spark I hadn't seen since before Ethan got married. Before the constant begging, the late-night calls, the empty "I love you, Mom" messages. I leaned closer. "You did it," I whispered to my reflection. "You finally stood up for yourself." And just like that, I smiled. It felt foreign at first, but real. In the kitchen, I poured the coffee into my favorite mug, the one Ashley once said was too old-fashioned. Now it felt like armor. Then I opened the drawer where I kept years of receipts and transfer slips, rent payments, grocery totals, gifts I'd bought just because. Stacks and stacks of proof that I'd tried to buy love. One by one, I fed them into the shredder. The paper sliced into ribbons, $33,500 worth of misplaced affection turning into confetti. It was strangely satisfying, almost musical. Each page that disappeared made me breathe a little easier. When I finished, the drawer was empty. And so finally was that part of me that believed love had to be earned with money. I spent the rest of the morning cleaning. Not the way I used to, trying to impress visitors, but for myself. Old clothes went into boxes for donation. Family photos I didn't have the heart to display anymore went into a single drawer. Not burned, not thrown away, just paused until I was ready.
By noon, my little house felt different, lighter. The air smelled like lemon cleaner and freedom. I sat on the porch with my coffee, feeling the breeze on my face. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for anyone to call. No one needed me. And somehow, that wasn't sad. It was peace. Inside, my phone buzzed twice. Voicemails from Ethan and Ashley, no doubt, but I didn't even look. Instead, I picked up my sketchbook, the one I hadn't touched in years. I drew a woman standing alone by the ocean, wind in her hair, her face calm, not broken, not angry, just free. When I looked at her, I realized something that made me smile. The woman in that sketch was me.
It had been 6 quiet days since the last confrontation. 6 peaceful mornings where I made my coffee, fed the birds, and sketched by the window. Like a small promise to myself that the noise was finally gone. But peace never lasts long when people can't stand to lose control. That afternoon, just as I was folding laundry, I heard the low hum of a car engine outside. Not a neighbor's pickup or delivery truck. This was slower, heavier. A black SUV. My stomach tightened before my mind could catch up. 3 knocks on the door, firm, confident. Not the kind of knock that asks permission, the kind that expects obedience. I took a breath and opened the door. There they were again. Ethan, looking tired but determined, Ashley with that same calculating half smile, and behind them, Mr. Fisher, the family attorney, with his perfect tie and empty eyes. "Mom," Ethan started, already slipping into that gentle, guilty tone, "can we please come in? We just want to talk." I crossed my arms. Talking's free, but manipulation costs extra. Ashley forced a soft laugh, pretending not to be insulted. "Renata, please, this isn't a fight. We're just worried about you living alone. It's a big house and big enough for peace," I interrupted. The lawyer cleared his throat, holding up a manila folder like a weapon dressed in paper. "Mrs. Richter, we've drafted a simple agreement. If you'd just take a look." I didn't take it. Instead, I looked straight at Ethan. "You brought him again? So this isn't a visit. It's an ambush." Ethan sighed. "Mom, you're being dramatic." I tilted my head. "Funny. That's what people say when they're losing control of the story." Ashley stepped forward, voice soft and sugar-coated. "We're just trying to make things easier for everyone. If you sign, we can handle the bills, taxes, property maintenance." "And what do I get?" I asked. "Security," she said. I smiled faintly. "You mean silence. You want me quiet, compliant, predictable." The lawyer shifted uncomfortably, but Ashley didn't back down. "You're making this harder than it has to be." I took a slow step forward, meeting her eyes. "No, Ashley. I'm making it fair. That's new for you, isn't it?" Her expression cracked just for a second before she turned towards Ethan, whispering something under her breath. Then Ethan said the one thing that stung more than anything else. Dad would have never let it get to this. The air in the room froze. For a heartbeat, I couldn't breathe. "Don't," I said quietly. "Don't you dare use him." He looked down, guilt flickering. But it was too late. The damage was done. I opened the door wider and pointed outside. "Leave." "Mom!" I said, "Leave." Ashley rolled her eyes and muttered something about stubborn old women and brushed past me. Ethan hesitated, one last flicker of hesitation in his eyes. The boy he used to be, still trapped somewhere under the man Ashley built. Then he followed her out. The car door slammed.
The engine started, and as the SUV rolled down the street, I finally let my breath out. The silence afterwards wasn't peaceful this time. It was charged, like the air before a storm. I walked to my desk, opened a new page in my notebook, and wrote 6 words in firm, steady handwriting. They're not going to stop here. And I was right, because sometimes when you stop letting people control you, they don't retreat, they attack.
The night was loud, rain hammering the roof, wind pressing against the windows. But the real storm was inside her head. Ethan's words kept echoing, sharp and heavy. Dad would have never let it get to this. Maybe he was right, or maybe it was just another way of saying, "This is your fault, Mom." Sleep never came. By dawn, the rain had softened to a quiet drizzle. Renat made a cup of tea and walked into Tom's old study, a room sealed in time since the day he died. The air smelled of old paper, dust, and cedar. Everything was still in its place. His books, his pens, his small wooden box in the corner of the desk. She hesitated before touching it. The key was still in the lock. Inside were a few letters, neatly tied with a thin piece of string. Her name was written on the top envelope in Tom's steady hand. Renat, open only when you can't make sense of them anymore. She smiled faintly. "You always did love your little mysteries," she whispered. The first letter was dated August 2017. His words were simple, but cut deep. "You've always been too kind, Renat. That's your strength and your weakness. You believe you can love people until they become better. One day, someone will use that against you. Promise me you won't let them." Her eyes stung as she read it again and again. It was like he'd been watching from somewhere, seeing everything unfold long before she did. The second letter was from June 2018, a month after Ethan's wedding. "Ashley's clever, but she doesn't love him the way you think she does. She looks at him like a key, not a person. When I'm gone, she'll try to make you feel small to control you. Don't let her." A chill ran through her. He had seen it. The manipulation, the charm, the way Ashley's kindness always came with strings. The last letter was dated just weeks before Tom passed. "If Ethan ever lets her talk him into managing your money, walk away. You'll think you're losing family, but really, you'll just be finding yourself again. There's a difference between being loved and being owned." Renat sat back in the chair, clutching the letters to her chest. For a long time, she didn't move. Outside, the rain eased into a soft patter, like the world itself was listening. She finally tied the string back around the letters, placed them gently in the box, and closed the lid. "You were right, Tom. I hear you now." For years, she had lived half asleep, afraid to be alone, afraid to disappoint, afraid to lose what little family she had left. But as the morning light crept across the room, something inside her shifted. The fear didn't vanish, but it stopped being in charge. She felt calm, steady, like a woman who had finally found her footing after years of sinking. She poured another cup of tea, looked out the window at the clearing sky, and said softly to herself, "It's time to act." The next morning came bright and clear, the kind of morning that makes everything look sharper, cleaner, like the world has decided to start over. Renat sat at the kitchen table, the letters beside her, the steam from her coffee curling into the air like smoke from a signal fire. She had spent the night reading them over and over until the words didn't feel like advice anymore. They felt like orders. For years, she had played defense. Now she was ready to move first. She started with the stack of mail she'd been avoiding: bank statements, property assessments, insurance notices. All the small windows into her life that Ashley had tried to wedge open. She studied every page, highlighting names,
marking contact numbers, circling details that didn't sit right. Then, with the precision of someone who's finally tired of being fooled, she made a list. Lawyer, financial advisor, estate planner. By noon, she was dressed and out the door. It felt strange driving herself again. The steering wheel was slick from her palms, but the road ahead felt different this time, like she wasn't running away, but toward something solid. She parked outside a brick office building downtown and sat for a moment, watching people pass by with their coffee cups and busy faces. Then she took a deep breath and went inside. The plaque on the door read, "Patricia Warren, Attorney at Law." The receptionist looked up, smiling politely. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," Renat said, her voice calm and clear. "But I think I need one." 15 minutes later, she was sitting across from Patricia, a woman in her 50s with silver hair, dark glasses, and an expression that didn't waste time. "So," Patricia said, folding her hands, "tell me what's going on." Renat took a moment. She hadn't told anyone the full story before, not even Tom when he was alive. But now it came pouring out. The rent money, the credit cards, the fake concern, the lawyer they brought to her door. Patricia didn't interrupt once. She just listened, her expression steady. When Renat finished, the room was quiet for a moment. "Mrs. Richter," Patricia said, "you've been financially exploited. What your daughter-in-law and son are trying to do falls under coercion and undue influence. We can protect you." Renat exhaled, not relief exactly, but something close. "What do I need to do?" Patricia leaned forward. "We'll start with documentation, bank records, property deeds, copies of anything you've given them. We'll file a legal notice that you are of sound mind and fully competent. And I'd recommend updating your will, making it very clear that no one but you controls your assets." Renat nodded, her fingers steady. "I want that done as soon as possible." Patricia smiled. "You remind me of my mother. She used to say, 'People mistake quiet for weakness until the quiet starts fighting back.'" That night, Renat returned home and sat by the window with a glass of tea. The street was calm, the neighborhood still. For the first time, she felt safe. Not because someone was protecting her, but because she had decided to protect herself. She opened her notebook and began to write. Not a letter this time, but a plan. Steps, dates, details. The kind of list that meant business. When she finished, she closed it and whispered to the empty room. They wanted control. They're about to learn what that really means. Outside, a single street light flickered, like a quiet nod from the universe. The game had changed. She wasn't their target anymore. She was the one setting the rules. The next week unfolded with an almost eerie calm. No calls, no surprise visits, not even one of Ashley's polite little text messages pretending to check in. It was the kind of silence that doesn't come from peace, but from people regrouping. Renati knew better than to think they'd given up. People like Ashley didn't walk away when they lost control. They reloaded. Every morning, Renati followed her new routine. Coffee, a walk through her garden, and a quick check of her documents spread neatly across the dining table. Patricia, her lawyer, had helped her organize everything. Every receipt, every transfer, every small financial thread Ashley had once tugged on. Now those threads were neatly tied into a rope, one Renate could pull if she ever needed to defend herself. By Thursday, she was ready for the next step. Patricia had arranged a meeting at the bank to secure her accounts and remove Ethan's secondary access. Renati walked into the branch with her chin high, wearing the same beige coat Tom had once said made her look dangerously elegant. She smiled at that thought. The banker, a young man with perfect hair and a careful tone, verified her ID and began updating the paperwork. "So, Mrs. Richter," he said politely, You'll be the sole account holder going forward? Yes, she said, steady and simple. Just me. As he typed, she caught her reflection in the glass divider. An older woman, yes, but not fragile, not anymore. When the banker slid the final form toward her, she signed it with deliberate calm. The pen didn't even tremble. On her way out, she stopped by the grocery store. The cashier smiled and said, "Good morning, Mrs. Richter. You look sharp today." Renate chuckled softly. It's a good day to look like you mean it. Back home, she unpacked her groceries, fresh bread, soup vegetables, a small bouquet of yellow tulips. The house smelled like lemon polish and quiet determination. But as she arranged the flowers, a faint sound broke the stillness. A car slowing down outside, tires crunching against the gravel. Her heart thudded once, heavy but not fearful. She didn't even need to look. Somehow she already knew who it was. A knock followed, sharp, impatient, the kind that didn't care about welcome mats. Renate straightened her shoulders and opened the door. Ashley stood there, sunglasses on despite the cloudy sky, holding her phone like a weapon. Ethan hovered a step behind her, looking tired, conflicted, like someone caught between loyalty and guilt. Ashley didn't waste a second. "You've been busy," she said, her tone half smile, half sneer. "Changing accounts, calling lawyers. That's not very trusting of you." Renate didn't flinch. "Trust is earned. You had your chance." Ashley tilted her head. "You know, Ethan and I were thinking, maybe it's time we help you downsize. Big house like this, all alone, it's dangerous." Renate's eyes narrowed. Dangerous for who? The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Then Ethan finally spoke, his voice softer, almost pleading. "Mom, please, can we come in? Just to talk?" "No," she said, quiet but absolute. "Talking is how you start taking." Ashley's polite mask slipped. "You can't keep doing this. You're being paranoid." Renate smiled faintly. "And you're being predictable." Ashley's jaw tightened. She turned on her heel, muttering something under her breath as she walked back to the car. Ethan lingered for a second, looking at his mother, the woman who had always given, and the one now refusing to do so. He said nothing, just looked at her with something like regret before following his wife. As the SUV disappeared down the street, Renate exhaled slowly. The storm hadn't come yet, but it was close. She looked down at the tulips on the table, their petals wide open in the sun, and smiled to herself. Let them come. She wasn't hiding anymore. The next morning, Renate woke to the smell of rain on the pavement and the faint echo of tires splashing outside. It was Saturday, quiet, gray, and heavy with that sense of something waiting. She made coffee and sat by the window, watching a lone sparrow hop along the fence. The house felt calm, but she could sense the shift, like pressure before a storm. She spent the morning reviewing her notes, the folders Patricia had helped her build, the new bank documents, the copies of every transfer she'd made to Ethan over the years. It was a strange kind of satisfaction, turning their manipulation into evidence. Every dollar she'd once handed over like love was now proof of betrayal. Around noon, the phone rang. She almost didn't answer, but the caller ID made her pause. Private number. For a second, she thought it might be Patricia. Instead, a man's voice came through, smooth and practiced. "Mrs. Richter, this is Daniel Hayes from the County Welfare Office. We received a concern from your family. They're worried about your well-being. Do you mind if we schedule a home visit?" Renate froze. It was a clever move, a weapon dressed as kindness. "A concern?" she asked. "Who filed it?" I can't disclose that, ma'am, but it's standard procedure. She could hear Ashley's fingerprints all over it, the false compassion, the bureaucratic tone. No need for a visit, she said calmly. My attorney will reach out if you require documentation. Your attorney? The man repeated, surprised. Yes, Patricia Warren. She'll handle all correspondence. There was a pause, the sound of someone caught off guard. Understood, ma'am. Have a good day. The line clicked dead. Renate set the phone down, her hand steady. It wasn't fear anymore. It was confirmation. They weren't done. They were escalating. That evening, she met Patricia again, this time at her office after hours. The rain had started up again, tapping lightly on the window behind them. They filed a welfare concern, Renate said, sliding her phone across the desk, trying to paint me as unstable. Patricia's lips tightened. Classic guardianship maneuver. They want to build a record, show that you're confused, unsafe, maybe even incapable of handling your finances. But they made a mistake. Renate raised an eyebrow. What mistake? They tipped their hand too early, Patricia said, leaning forward. Now we go on record first. We'll have a medical evaluation, notarized statements, proof of your transactions, and a witness affidavit. By the time they make a move, the court will already know who's in control. For the first time in months, Renate felt a quiet thrill. Not joy, exactly, but something sharper. Power. She said, "Let's do it." When she returned home, she stood for a moment in the dark hallway, the sound of rain muffled against the roof. The house, her house, felt alive again. No longer a cage, but a fortress. She walked into the living room, turned on a single lamp, and whispered into the silence, "You wanted a fight, Ashley. Now you'll get one." Outside, lightning flashed in the distance, and for the first time, Renate didn't flinch. She smiled. The storm was coming, and this time, it wasn't coming for her.
Sunday morning came with sunlight so sharp it made the world look too honest. Renata woke early, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. The kind of alertness that comes when fear finally leaves the body. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the old wall clock and the soft hum of the refrigerator. It felt like the calm before an orchestra starts to play. Measured, deliberate, waiting. She dressed neatly, put on her light blue cardigan, and headed to the local clinic. Patricia had scheduled a medical evaluation, and Renata wanted to make sure there were no surprises. The doctor, a woman named Dr. Monroe, was warm, calm, and thorough. They talked for almost an hour about memory, medication, diet, and even stress. At the end, Dr. Monroe smiled. "Mrs. Richter, you're more than fine. You're sharper than half the people I see in their 40s. I'll send the report to your attorney today." Renata laughed lightly. "So I'm officially sane?" "Certified and sealed," the doctor said with a grin. It was a small thing, but walking out of that office, she felt taller, stronger, like she just claimed a piece of herself they had tried to take away. When she got home, she found an envelope wedged into the corner of her front door. No stamp, no name, just a folded sheet of paper inside. It read, "We didn't want to do this, but you're forcing our hand. The house isn't safe for you anymore. Either let us help or things will get messy." No signature, but she didn't need one. The voice behind those words was unmistakable, cold, confident. Ashley. Renata stood there for a long moment, reading the note again, her expression calm. Then she walked to the fireplace, struck a match, and fed the paper to the flame. The words curled, blackened, and vanished into soft gray ash. That evening, Patricia called. "We filed the notarized medical letter, the property statement, and your updated will. You're fully protected now. If they try to move through legal channels, they'll hit a wall."
Renata nodded slowly, watching the last of the sunset through her kitchen window. "They won't stop because of walls," she said quietly. "They'll find a window." Patricia hesitated. "Then we'll lock those too." After the call ended, Renata poured herself a glass of wine. The day had been long, but for once the exhaustion felt earned. She turned on the old radio, the one Tom used to listen to on Sunday nights, and let the slow jazz fill the room. For a few minutes, she allowed herself to remember the woman she used to be. Gentle, forgiving, always putting everyone else first. That woman had loved deeply, but she had also been easy to break. Now, as the music drifted through the quiet house, Renata realized something that made her chest ache in a new way. She didn't want revenge. She wanted respect. And if she had to build it from the ashes of this fight, she would. Outside, the night deepened, and the air carried that thick, waiting silence again, the kind that comes right before someone makes their next move. Renata smiled faintly, setting her empty glass on the table. "Your move, Ashley," she murmured to the dark.
Monday morning felt strangely light. The air outside carried the cool scent of autumn leaves, and the sun filtered gently through Renate's kitchen window. She had slept deeply for the first time in weeks, her mind no longer running endless loops of anxiety. The coffee brewed slow and steady, its warmth filling the quiet kitchen. For a brief moment, everything felt almost normal again. That illusion ended when the phone rang. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Mrs. Richter, this is Officer Daniels from the County Sheriff's Office. I'd like to inform you that a welfare check was requested on your behalf. Mind if I stop by to verify everything's okay?" Renate closed her eyes for a second, steadying her breath. Another move from Ashley. "You can come by," she said, "but I'd appreciate it if you'd bring your badge." There was a pause, a hint of respect in the officer's tone. "Of course, ma'am. I'll be there in 10. When he arrived, she was already waiting at the door, her documents neatly arranged on the table behind her. He stepped inside cautiously, scanning the spotless living room. "I'm sorry to bother you, Mrs. Richter. We just have to follow up on these reports." Renate nodded. "I understand. Would you like to see my medical certificate? It's dated this week." She handed him the envelope from Dr. Monroe. He opened it, reading quickly, his expression shifting from polite professionalism to quiet embarrassment. "Looks like someone's wasting our time," he muttered. Renate smiled faintly. "I wouldn't say wasting. Let's call it education." He chuckled softly. "If it happens again, call me directly. Some families abuse this process when they can't get what they want." "I'm aware," she said. "Trust me, I'm learning fast." After he left, the silence felt different, not fragile anymore, but protective. She walked back to her desk and opened her laptop. Patricia had sent her a message. "Meeting with the judge scheduled. Preliminary defense documents are approved. You're ready." Ready. The word pulsed like electricity. She closed the laptop and went to the window. Across the street, she noticed a car idling, a white SUV she didn't recognize. It stayed there for several minutes, engine running. She didn't need to see through the tinted glass to know who it was. Ashley. Watching. Waiting. Renate turned away, calm and deliberate, and picked up her phone. She called Patricia. "She's outside," Renate said quietly. "Then don't do a thing," Patricia replied. "Let her watch. Every move she makes without permission strengthens our case." Renee hung up, poured herself another cup of coffee, and sat by the window. The SUV eventually drove away. For the first time, Renate didn't feel like prey. She was the one collecting evidence now.
That evening, she opened her old photo album, pages of a life before this war. Pictures of Tom smiling in their backyard, of Ethan as a baby, of birthdays and snow days. It didn't hurt as much anymore. Those memories didn't belong to the people they had become. They belonged to her. She whispered to the photograph of her late husband, "I think you'd be proud of me, Tom. I'm finally fighting back." And as the night deepened, Renee realized that for the first time since this all began, she wasn't just surviving, she was winning.
Tuesday morning started with a crisp chill, the kind that made every breath visible in the air. Renate wrapped herself in a shawl and stood by the kitchen window, watching the fog drift through the street. The neighborhood looked peaceful, almost deceptively so, as if nothing had happened. No threats, no betrayal, no games played behind her back. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Patricia. "Court hearing scheduled for next Thursday. Don't worry, we're ready." Renate typed back, "Thank you. I'm not afraid anymore." After breakfast, she decided to take a walk. She hadn't done that in years, not just to run errands, but to walk for herself. The park was quiet, scattered with golden leaves that crunched beneath her shoes. A group of children were playing by the swings, their laughter cutting through the morning stillness. It made her smile. Then a voice behind her, familiar, sharp. "Mom?" She turned slowly. Ethan stood there, hands shoved in his jacket pockets, eyes red-rimmed and tired. He looked smaller somehow, not like the man who'd once spoken to her as if she were an obstacle. "What do you want, Ethan?" Her tone was calm, not cold, just measured. He sighed. "I didn't mean for things to go this far. Ashley, she pushes hard. She said this was the only way to get you to listen." Renate looked at him, her eyes steady. "Listen to what? That I should keep paying your bills? That I should pretend you humiliated me?" He winced. "You're twisting it." "I'm not twisting anything. You made your choices. You both did." He rubbed his face with both hands. "We were desperate, Mom. I lost hours at work. Ashley's job barely covers the rent. You thought I'd keep saving you forever, even if it meant I had nothing left?" He didn't answer. The weight of his silence said enough. For a long while, they sat there, watching the children run and shout. Finally, Renate stood up. "I hope you find your way, Ethan. Truly. But you'll have to do it without my money." He looked up at her, eyes glassy. "I miss Dad," he said quietly. "I do too, but he would be ashamed of what you've become." She walked away before he could answer, her heart pounding, not from fear, but from release. The war wasn't over, but for the first time, she could feel herself winning it. Not in court, not in money, but in spirit. Wednesday morning arrived, dressed in sunlight and stillness, but Renate could feel the air thick with tension, like the quiet before a verdict. The call with Patricia the night before replayed in her head. They're preparing a counterclaim. Expect something soon. She'd slept little, drifting in and out of uneasy dreams where voices blurred with thunder. She made her coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and opened her notebook. Across the first page, she had written a single sentence in bold ink. No more fear. The word steadied her. She needed that reminder today. At 10, Patricia called. "They filed early," she said. "Guardianship petition, claiming you're mentally unfit to manage your affairs. They're using your age, not evidence." Renate let out a low breath. So, that's their next move. "I've already contacted the judge. We'll file for dismissal and request sanctions for harassment, but we'll need to show intent, proof that Ashley is driving this." Renate's eyes hardened. "I can give you that." After the call, she went to her study and opened the drawer where she kept her old phone. She had stopped using it months ago, but the messages were still there, the ones that Ashley had sent before everything went public. Threats dressed as concern, promises of help if she just signed over power of attorney. She printed every message, each timestamp like a scar. That afternoon, she drove downtown to Patricia's office. The drive felt like moving through fog, but her mind was clear, precise. When she arrived, Patricia was waiting with files spread across her desk. "She did the right thing," she said, glancing through the printed texts. "This will show manipulation. The court will see it for what it is." Renata sat down across from her. "It's not just about winning, Patricia. It's about ending this. I don't want to live my last years in someone else's game." Patricia smiled faintly. "Then let's end it on your terms." When Renata returned home that evening, the sun was dipping low, turning the sky a pale gold. She stepped out on the porch, breathing in the scent of wet grass. Across the street, the same white SUV sat parked again, engine running, windows tinted. This time, she didn't look away. She raised her phone, snapped a clear photo, and sent it to Patricia with a short message. "She's back." A minute later, Patricia replied, "Perfect, that's stalking. Keep the photo, we'll use it." Renata slipped her phone into her pocket and smiled to herself. For the first time, the fear had shifted completely, no longer hers to carry. It belonged to them now. Inside, she turned off the lights and let the evening settle. The fight was far from over, but the ground beneath her feet finally felt firm. She wasn't reacting anymore, she was leading.
The next morning began with rain. Thin, silver lines streaked the windows, the soft rhythm echoing through the house like a heartbeat. Renate watched from her kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had long gone cold. Outside, the world felt washed clean. But she knew better. Storms didn't erase damage. They only revealed what was left standing afterward. Her phone buzzed again. A new message from Patricia. Ashley's attorney requested a settlement meeting. They're nervous. Renate felt something sharp. Not fear this time, but a quiet satisfaction. Nervous meant cracks were forming. Nervous meant the game was turning. She spent the morning reviewing her notes, each page covered in details. Dates, messages, recordings, screenshots. Every piece of manipulation, every moment they'd tried to twist her words or isolate her. What once felt like chaos now looked like structure, a case built with precision. She had done this herself. By noon, she received another call. Patricia's voice was calm but direct. "They're suggesting mediation before court. I think they're trying to avoid the judge seeing those messages." Renate smiled faintly. "Good. Let them squirm." Patricia hesitated. "If you agree to mediation, you'll have to see them face to face. Are you ready for that?" Renate looked toward the rain-soaked window, her reflection faint, but steady. "I think it's time they see who they've been fighting." The meeting was scheduled for Friday. That evening, she sat at her desk and opened a small wooden box. Inside were a few old photos. Tom's graduation picture, a faded postcard from their honeymoon in Maine, and a letter he'd written her years ago. She read it slowly, tracing his handwriting. "You've always been stronger than you realize. You just need someone to remind you." Tears burned her eyes, but she didn't look away. "I'm doing it, Tom. I'm reminding myself." Later that night, as thunder rolled in the distance, she drafted a short email to Patricia. "Tell them I'll attend mediation, but only on one condition. It happens in person. No screens, no calls. I want them to look at me when they lie." She hit send and closed her laptop. The house was quiet except for the rain. In that silence, she felt something new. Not victory, not yet, but power. The kind that comes when a person stops asking for peace and starts demanding it. She turned off the light, leaving only the glow of the window. The storm outside raged, but inside, Renate finally slept without fear.
Thursday arrived gray and windless, the kind of morning that felt paused between seasons. Renata woke early, long before sunrise, and sat at the edge of her bed listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the house. It was the day before mediation, the day before she'd face Ethan and Ashley again. Her mind was steady, but her hands trembled slightly as she buttoned her blouse, not from fear, but anticipation. Downstairs, the air smelled faintly of rain and coffee. She poured herself a cup, adding a single spoon of honey, Tom's old habit. The small ritual grounded her. On the counter lay the folder Patricia had sent overnight, neatly labeled, Mediation Prep, Key Points. She flipped through it, her eyes moving over phrases she now understood like second nature. Emotional coercion, financial exploitation, pattern of deceit. At 9:30, Patricia called. "Just checking in," she said. "Are you holding up?" Renata smiled softly. "Better than I thought I would." "Good," Patricia said. "Remember, this isn't about convincing them. It's about showing you can't be controlled. When people like Ashley lose control, they make mistakes. Let her talk." Renata laughed quietly. "Let her hang herself, you mean?" Patricia didn't deny it. "Exactly." The rest of the day passed in slow rhythm. Renata cleaned, watered her plants, and folded laundry she'd already folded once before. By afternoon, she found herself sitting in the living room, sunlight pooling across the carpet. She caught her reflection in the glass cabinet. Older, yes, but unbroken. For years, she had played the role of the soft one, the forgiving one. That part of her still existed, but now it had edges. As evening fell, she prepared dinner for one, roasted vegetables, a glass of white wine. She ate slowly, savoring each bite. Halfway through the meal, her phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. "Enjoy your last quiet night. Tomorrow won't end how you think." She stared at it for a long moment. Then she smiled, not out of amusement, but because she finally understood what fear looked like when it changed sides. Without hesitation, she forwarded the message to Patricia with a note. "Looks like she's nervous." Then she blocked the number, finished her wine, and stood by the window. The moon was high, silver light spilling across the yard. Renata whispered, "Tomorrow, we end this." And for the first time in months, she slept through the night without waking once.
Friday came sharp and bright, the kind of day that seemed too beautiful for confrontation. Renate woke before dawn, dressed carefully, and tied her hair back the way she used to when she still worked at the library. Precise, professional, unshakable. The air smelled faintly of rain, and somewhere down the street a dog barked, echoing off the houses. By 8:30, Patricia was already waiting for her outside the mediation center. "You look ready," she said. Renata gave a small smile. "I've been ready for years." Inside, the conference room was colder than she expected. Long glass table, gray walls, coffee pot steaming quietly in the corner. At the far end sat Ashley, perfectly composed, her lipstick immaculate, her eyes calculating. Beside her, Ethan looked restless, tapping a pen against the folder in front of him. He didn't meet his mother's gaze. The mediator, a man with silver hair and a voice like a calm lecture, began with pleasantries that meant nothing. "We're here to seek understanding," he said, "to find a resolution that brings peace to both sides." Ashley's mouth twitched. "I'm sure we'd all love that," she said smoothly, turning toward Renate with mock warmth. "You've been under a lot of stress lately. We just want what's best for you." Renate folded her hands on the table. "I'm sure you do," she replied evenly. Patricia slid a document forward. "These are the text messages and financial statements we've gathered. They show a clear pattern of coercion and intent to control Mrs. Harris's finances." Ashley's composure cracked just slightly. "That's ridiculous," she snapped. "Those texts were taken out of context." Patricia leaned back. "Then I'm sure the judge will enjoy the full context." The room went silent. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, his jaw tight. "Mom," he said quietly, "this doesn't have to be ugly. We can fix it. We just—" "Stop," Renata interrupted. Her voice was soft, but it carried. "You both have spent months trying to scare me. You've taken my kindness for weakness. You've threatened me, lied to me, and used my love as leverage. That ends today." Ashley rolled her eyes. "You think anyone's going to believe you over us? You're—" "Careful," Patricia cut in sharply. "That tone won't help you." Ashley leaned back, lips pressed tight. Renate reached into her bag and pulled out a small photograph. One of her and Tom, smiling on their front porch decades ago. She placed it on the table. "My husband built this house with his own hands. I've spent 40 years keeping it standing. You will not take it from me." The mediator cleared his throat, trying to steady the tension. "Perhaps we should take a short break." Renate stood, her chair scraping softly against the tile. "No need. I've said everything I came to say." She turned to Patricia. "We're done here." And as they walked out into the bright morning, Ashley's voice rose behind them, sharp and trembling, the sound of someone finally realizing they'd lost control. Renate didn't look back.
The sunlight outside felt too warm for how cold that room had been. Renate stepped onto the sidewalk, inhaling the crisp autumn air that smelled faintly of wet leaves and gasoline. Patricia walked beside her in silence for a few moments, her heels clicking against the pavement. "You handled that perfectly," Patricia said finally. "You didn't give them an inch." Renate smiled faintly. "I've been giving inches my whole life. I'm out of them." They stopped by Patricia's car. "Next step," the attorney continued, opening her folder, "we'll move for a protective order and sanctions. The mediator will file his report today. It's over, Renate. At least legally." Renate nodded but didn't answer. She wasn't ready to believe it was truly over yet. People like Ashley didn't stop because a paper said so. When Patricia drove away, Renate stood for a moment watching the leaves swirl in the wind. Then she walked to her car, feeling the slow release of tension she hadn't even known she was carrying. That evening, she sat by her window with a cup of chamomile tea, watching the sunset stain the sky a deep orange. For the first time in months, her phone didn't buzz. No calls, no threats, just quiet. She exhaled, the sound soft but heavy with relief. Then, around 9 p.m., headlights flared outside her house, slow, deliberate. She froze. The car idled at the curb, engine low and steady. Her stomach tightened. She parted the curtain just enough to see. It was Ethan, alone. After a long moment, she opened the door. He stood by his car, rain jacket unzipped, hands jammed into his pockets. His face was pale, tired. "Can we talk?" he asked, voice rough. Renate hesitated, then nodded toward the porch. 5 minutes. He climbed the steps and stopped a few feet away from her. "She's furious," he said quietly. "Ashley says you humiliated her. She's planning something. I don't even know what." Renate's expression didn't change. "You knew this would happen." "I didn't think it'd go this far," he muttered. "She says she'll go to the press, tell them you abused her, that you're hiding money." Renat gave a short, humorless laugh. "Let her. Truth has a way of surviving people like her." Ethan looked at her for a long moment, shame flickering in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Mom. I don't need your apology. I need you to start being the man your father thought you'd be." He nodded, eyes downcast. "If she comes here, she won't." Renat interrupted. Her tone was calm, unshaken. "But if she does, I'll be ready." Ethan swallowed hard, turned, and walked back to his car. As he drove away, the night felt heavier, but different, no longer suffocating, just waiting. Renat locked the door, turned off the porch light, and whispered into the still air, "It's almost over." Then she went upstairs, closed her notebook, and slept with the quiet certainty of someone who has finally reclaimed her life.
Saturday morning rose, pale and still, the kind of quiet that felt like a held breath. Renate woke before dawn, sunlight only a faint promise behind the curtains. For a moment, she lay in bed listening, the creak of the floorboards, the distant hum of the fridge downstairs. Nothing out of place. No footsteps outside, no car engine idling. Just peace, fragile and real. She went to the kitchen, made coffee, and stood by the window. The front yard was damp with dew, the world tinted soft gold. She took a slow sip, exhaling as if releasing years of pressure in one breath. Then the doorbell rang. Her stomach tightened. The sound sliced through the quiet like a blade. She set her cup down and walked to the door, her hand steady. Through the frosted glass, she saw the outline of a woman, short, tense, shoulders drawn back. Ashley. Renate opened the door but didn't step aside. "You're not supposed to be here." Ashley's smile was brittle. "Relax, I'm not here to cause trouble." "You're violating a court order. That is trouble." Ashley's expression flickered. Maybe irritation, fear. "You think you've won, don't you? You humiliated me. You turned Ethan against me." "I didn't turn anyone," Renate replied. "He made his choice." Ashley's voice cracked, rising. "You think you can just erase me? After everything I've done for that man? I was the one holding him together after you broke him." Renate took a slow breath. "You're angry because your lies stopped working. That's all." For a heartbeat, neither woman moved. Then, Ashley's hand shot out, not to strike, but to point, trembling with fury. "You don't deserve that house. You don't deserve peace. You'll die alone here, and no one will remember you." Renate smiled faintly. "Maybe, but at least I'll die free." Ashley's face twisted, her bravado faltering. "You'll regret this," she hissed, stepping back. "I already did," Renate said quietly. "For years." "Not anymore." She turned sharply, storming down the path toward her car. Tires squealed as she sped off, disappearing around the corner. Renate closed the door, locking it carefully. Her hands shook, but her mind was clear. She walked to the phone, called Patricia, and said calmly, "She came here. I have her on camera." "Perfect," Patricia replied. "That's a violation. I'll handle it." When she hung up, Renate leaned against the wall and let out a breath that turned into a laugh, soft, shaky, but real. The house felt lighter somehow, like it had exhaled with her. Outside, the clouds began to break,
sunlight spilling across the porch. She whispered to herself, "She's losing." Then she picked up her coffee, reheated it, and sat down to write the next page of her story, the one where she finally wins.
By Sunday, the neighborhood had returned to its usual rhythm. Dogs barking, sprinklers hissing, the hum of lawnmowers in the distance. But for Renate, the world felt sharper, more vivid. Every color, every sound carried a strange new clarity, as if the fog that had hung over her life for months had finally burned away. She woke with energy she hadn't felt in years. After breakfast, she walked outside to collect the morning paper, her robe brushing against the wet grass. For the first time, she didn't glance nervously at the street. No white SUV, no shadows in parked cars. Just the steady, ordinary quiet of a suburban morning. When she went back inside, her phone buzzed. A message from Patricia. Police report filed. The court will move fast this time. Rest easy, Renata. You've won. Renata smiled faintly, typing back, "Thank you for everything. I finally feel free." The rest of the day she spent doing small things. Things that used to seem meaningless, but now felt like luxury. She baked, dusted the bookshelves, opened every curtain in the house. Light spilled into every corner, touching even the quiet spaces she used to avoid. In the afternoon, she found herself in the attic, sorting through old boxes. There were photographs, yellowed letters, and a worn leather journal that had belonged to her husband, Tom. She sat cross-legged on the floor and flipped through it. Halfway through, she found an entry she didn't remember reading before. If you ever feel small, remember, you built more than a house. You built a life people tried to take because it was strong enough to envy. Tears filled her eyes, but this time they weren't from pain. She closed the journal gently, whispering, "You were right, Tom. You always were." Evening came soft and golden. She poured herself a glass of wine and sat on the porch watching the sunset sink behind the trees. The air was cool, scented with pine and the faint sweetness of distant barbecues. Somewhere down the street, kids laughed, chasing each other with sparklers. Her phone buzzed once more. A message from Ethan. "She's gone. Moved out today. I don't know where. I just thought you should know." Renata read the words twice, then set the phone down. The wind rustled the trees, carrying the smell of summer and rain. She didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. She sat quietly, letting the peace settle around her like a blanket. No anger, no regret, just stillness. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't waiting for anything or anyone. When the last of the sunlight slipped away, she whispered into the dusk, "It's finally over." And as the first stars blinked awake above her, Renata smiled. Not the smile of victory, but of a woman who had finally taken her life back, one truth at a time. Monday morning came with soft blue light and the distant chatter of birds outside the window. Renata stirred awake, her body instinctively braced for tension, for another message, another confrontation, but there was only silence. It took her a moment to realize what that meant. Peace wasn't temporary anymore. It had settled in. She made breakfast slowly, humming under her breath, the scent of toast and coffee filling the kitchen. The house, once heavy with unease, now felt alive again. Every sound, the creak of the floor, the whistle of the kettle, belonged to her. As she ate, she opened her laptop and saw an email from Patricia. "The court issued a restraining order this morning. It's official. She can't come near you or your property again. If she violates it, she's done. Renata smiled back and typed, "Thank you, Patricia. Truly, you helped me get my life back." After breakfast, she decided to do something she hadn't done in months: go into town. She dressed neatly, put on a light jacket, and drove with the windows down. The breeze carried the smell of cut grass and cinnamon from the bakery on the corner. She stopped there first, buying herself a pastry and sitting outside at a small metal table. People walked by, couples, parents with strollers, teenagers laughing too loud. Normal life. She realized how much she'd missed it. As she sipped her coffee, a familiar voice called her name. "Mrs. Harris?" She turned. It was Emily, her old neighbor from 3 houses down, a cheerful woman who always had gossip and homemade muffins. "We haven't seen you in forever," Emily said. "You look wonderful." Renata laughed softly. "It's been a long year." Emily nodded knowingly. "I heard a few things," she said, lowering her voice, "but you know how people talk. I'm just glad to see you smiling again." "Me too," Renata said, and she meant it. They talked for a while about gardens, church events, and a new Italian place opening downtown. Nothing heavy, nothing painful, just 2 women enjoying the morning sun. When Emily finally left, Renata sat for a moment longer, finishing her pastry and watching the breeze scatter napkins across the sidewalk. She didn't check her phone once. Later, driving home, she realized something had shifted. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was living again, on her terms, without fear or apology. When she pulled into the driveway, sunlight flashed across her front porch, glinting on the old brass house number Tom had nailed there decades ago. She touched it gently as she passed, whispering, "We're okay now." Inside, the house felt like it had exhaled, lighter, freer, almost new. Renata poured herself another cup of coffee, sat by the window, and let the world move quietly around her. No drama, no noise, just peace, the kind that comes only after you've earned it the hard way.
Tuesday dawned golden and slow, sunlight pooling across the hardwood floors. Renat woke to the soft rustle of wind through the curtains, a sound that once reminded her of loneliness, but now felt like calm. She dressed in a pale blue blouse, the one Tom used to say matched her eyes, and tied her hair back with a silk ribbon she hadn't worn in years. The day felt like it belonged to her again. She made breakfast, cracked eggs into the pan, and smiled at how ordinary it all was. No lawyers, no court papers, no ringing phones filled with dread, just the hiss of butter and the smell of coffee drifting through the kitchen. After eating, she sat on the porch with her notebook, flipping through old pages covered in worry and anger. The last entry ended with the words, "I will not be afraid." Beneath it, she wrote a new line, "And now I am not." Around noon, the mail truck pulled up. The driver, a young man with freckles and headphones dangling around his neck, waved cheerfully. "Morning, Mrs. Harris. Got something from the court for you." Renat's heart skipped once, just reflex, but when she opened the envelope, she found an official letter confirming what Patricia had said. The restraining order had been finalized and recorded. It was done. She stood on her porch for a while, letter in hand, watching the world move. A dog trotting down the sidewalk, a woman jogging past, the faint hum of distant traffic. For the first time in years, she felt invisible in the best possible way. No one was watching her. No one was plotting. She was just another woman enjoying her afternoon. Inside, she turned on the radio, an old station that played soft 70s tunes, and began to clean. Not the frantic, anxious kind of cleaning she used to do when stress needed somewhere to go, but the slow, gentle kind. She opened windows, let the air in, folded linens, polished picture frames. When she reached the old photograph of her wedding day, Tom smiling, her veil catching the sunlight, she paused. "We made it through," she whispered. "You'd be proud of me." In the evening, she sat in the backyard, watching the sky fade to lavender. The air smelled of jasmine and rain-soaked earth. Somewhere, a radio played faintly through an open window. Renat took a slow sip of tea and closed her eyes. She didn't think about Ashley or the months of fear. She didn't even think about winning. She just existed, fully, freely, in the quiet of her own life. And as dusk deepened, she smiled to herself. The kind of smile that comes only after surviving the storm and realizing the sun had never stopped shining. She'd just forgotten to look up.
Wednesday brought the kind of morning that felt soft and forgiving. A pale mist hung low over the neighborhood, and the world seemed to move slower, as if the universe had granted Renate one long exhale. She woke without the alarm, stretched, and lingered in bed, letting the sunlight warm her face. It had been months since she'd felt no reason to rush, no battle waiting at the edge of her day. Downstairs, she made oatmeal and drizzled it with honey, her husband's old habit she'd finally made her own. The house smelled of cinnamon and peace. After breakfast, she brewed a second cup of coffee and sat by the kitchen window, watching the world through the soft haze. On the table lay the court letters she'd received the day before, folded neatly, edges smoothed. It no longer felt like a weapon or a shield. It was just paper now, proof that the storm had passed. Her phone buzzed, a message from Ethan. "Mom, can we talk sometime this week? Just coffee. I want to make things right." Renate read it twice, her heart tightening. The old instinct, the one that used to whisper forgive too quickly, stirred inside her. But this time, she took her time. She stared out at the garden, at the yellow tulips bowing gently in the breeze, and thought of everything that had happened. The lies, the betrayal, the silence. Finally, she typed, "Maybe, but not yet. I need peace a little longer." Then she hit send and set the phone face down. She spent the rest of the morning in her garden. The soil was soft, still damp from the night rain. She trimmed the rose bushes, pulled weeds, and replanted lavender near the porch. The work grounded her. Dirt beneath her nails, the steady rhythm of breathing, and the sound of birds settling in the trees. By afternoon, the mist had lifted, revealing a wide blue sky. She brought out her notebook again and wrote a single line. "Healing doesn't come when others change. It comes when you stop needing them to." As the sun dipped lower, she made herself a sandwich, turned on the old radio, and let soft jazz fill the room. The air felt alive again, not empty, not haunted, just hers. Later that evening, as the light faded, she stood on her porch, arms crossed against the cooling air. Somewhere down the street, children were laughing. The sound rose, then disappeared into the dusk. Renate smiled to herself and whispered, "Maybe someday." Not about revenge, not about fear, about forgiveness, not given yet, but no longer impossible. And as the first stars blinked into the sky, she felt it clearly. The quiet inside her wasn't fragile anymore. It was hers to keep.
Thursday morning was clear and golden, sunlight spilling through the kitchen like liquid warmth. Renata woke early, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She felt rested, not just in her body, but deep down in the place where worry used to live. The house was silent, except for the faint ticking of the old wall clock, steady and reassuring. She made her coffee and walked outside barefoot. The grass was still cool beneath her feet. The air smelled of pine and fresh earth. Across the street, a neighbor waved while walking his dog, and for once, Renata didn't turn away quickly. She smiled and waved back. When she came inside, she checked her email. Patricia had written, "Court confirmed the restraining order is permanent. Ashley's legal counsel has withdrawn from her case. It's over, officially and completely." Renata read the message twice, letting the words sink in. Then, she closed the laptop and whispered to the empty room, "Finally." She spent the morning dusting shelves, rearranging books, and watering the plants by the window. When she reached the bookshelf in the corner, she paused on a framed photo, her wedding day. Tom was laughing in it. His eyes crinkled the way they always did when he teased her. She touched the glass gently and murmured, "You can rest easy now, love. We're safe." In the afternoon, she went into town again. She visited the small antique store on Main Street, the one she and Tom used to wander through on weekends. The bell over the door chimed softly as she entered, the air filled with the scent of old wood and lavender polish. "Mrs. Harris," the shopkeeper, an older man named Joe, smiled from behind the counter. "Been a while since I've seen you." "Too long," she said, running her fingers over a row of porcelain teacups. "I've had a lot going on." "Haven't we all?" he said kindly. "But it's good to see you out again." She bought a small music box, the kind that played soft piano notes when wound. When she got home, she placed it on her nightstand and turned the key. The tune floated gently through the room, sweet and haunting. That evening, Renata sat on the porch as the light faded, sipping tea and listening to the song play from the open window behind her. The melody mingled with the sound of crickets and the faint hum of life in the distance. Her phone buzzed once, another message from Ethan. "I'm proud of you, Mom. I mean it." This time, she smiled and replied, "Thank you. I hope you're finding your peace too." She set the phone down and watched the horizon. The sky burned orange, then pink, then the soft blue of evening. For the first time in years, she felt a quiet certainty settle in her chest, not the brittle kind that needed proof or permission, but the solid, lasting kind that comes when the worst is behind you and the future finally feels wide open. Renata closed her eyes, breathed in the cool air, and thought, this is what freedom sounds like.
Friday morning arrived wrapped in calm. The sky was washed in pale blue, streaked with the kind of light that makes everything seem gentler, newer. Renate woke to the smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen. Her timer had done its job. She smiled as she slipped into her robe, the soft cotton brushing against her skin. It was the kind of small comfort she hadn't noticed in years. She took her cup to the porch and sat in the rocker, the wood creaking beneath her like an old friend sighing in relief. The world was just waking, the paperboy's bike wheels on the pavement, a distant dog barking, a single car engine turning over. Life, simple and unremarkable, exactly as she wanted it. Her phone buzzed. It was a call from an unfamiliar number. She hesitated, her heart still trained to brace itself for trouble, then answered. "Mrs. Harris?" a woman's voice asked politely. "This is Dana from Silvercrest Retirement Association. We received your application. I wanted to let you know your membership's been approved. Renate blinked, then laughed softly. Oh, that was quick. Yes, ma'am, Dana said cheerfully. We'd love to have you join our art classes and community events. The first one's next week. Watercolor workshop if you're interested. I think I am, Renate said, surprising herself with how true it felt. Thank you, Dana. When she hung up, she sat for a moment letting the idea sink in. A new place, new faces, new beginnings, not born from necessity, but from choice. For the first time in decades, she wasn't doing something to please anyone else. She was building something for herself. Later, she drove into town to pick up supplies for the art class. Brushes, paints, a new canvas. The clerk, a young woman with paint smudged on her hands, smiled when she rang up the purchase. Starting something new? Starting over, Renate said with a grin. Back home, she unpacked everything carefully, lining up the brushes on her kitchen table like soldiers waiting for orders. The bright colors made her heart flutter, a quiet, unexpected thrill. In the evening, Eleanor stopped by with 2 slices of cherry pie. I baked too much again, she said, handing her a plate. They ate together on the porch, the sound of cicadas humming in the background. You look lighter, happier, Eleanor said, watching her friend. I am, Renate admitted. For so long I thought peace was something I had to earn. Turns out it was just waiting for me to stop fighting myself. They sat together in companionable silence, 2 women who had both learned the hard way what it meant to reclaim their lives. When Eleanor left, Renate stayed outside, watching the stars come out one by one. She thought of Tom, of the son she once knew, of all the years she'd spent giving until she was empty. Then she thought of now, the music box on her nightstand, the paint waiting on her table, the quiet hum of her own breath, and realized she was finally full again. When she went to bed, she left the window open, letting the night air drift in. Somewhere in the distance, wind chimes whispered. Renate smiled in the dark and thought, tomorrow, I'll paint the sunrise. Saturday began with the scent of rain, that clean, electric smell that fills the air before the first drop even falls. Renate stood by the window, a mug of coffee warming her hands, and watched the sky shift from silver to soft gray. The garden shimmered under the weight of dew, each leaf heavy with quiet promise. For years, mornings had been tasks, transfers, phone calls, errands, guilt. Now they were rituals, small sacred pauses that reminded her she was still here, still breathing, still free. By mid-morning, the rain began in earnest, tapping gently against the windows. Renate set up her new art supplies on the kitchen table. The hum of the storm outside blended with the soft scratch of pencil on canvas. At first, her hand trembled. She hadn't drawn in decades. But as the lines began to form, something inside her loosened. She painted the way the rain looked when it met the earth, how it blurred edges and softened everything it touched. When she finished the first piece, she laughed quietly. It wasn't perfect. The lines were uneven, the colors too bold, but it felt alive. And more importantly, it felt like her. Around noon, there was a knock at the door. She hesitated before opening it, but when she did, a familiar face smiled back. It was Diana, her sister, holding a suitcase in one hand and a bag of groceries in the other. "Surprise," Diana said, her voice warm and teasing. "I figured it was about time I came to see you in person instead of just calling." Renate froze for a moment, then pulled her into a hug. "Diana, you didn't even tell me you were coming." "I wanted to make sure you wouldn't talk yourself out of it," her sister said with a grin. "Besides, I brought wine." They spent the afternoon cooking together, pasta, salad, garlic bread, the house filling with laughter and the smell of roasting tomatoes. The rain drummed gently against the roof as they talked about everything and nothing. For the first time in a long time, Renate didn't feel the need to censor herself, to make excuses for Max, or to pretend everything was fine. "Do you ever miss them?" Diana asked quietly after dinner. Renate thought for a moment, her fork resting on the plate. "I miss who I thought they were, but not who they became. I think that's the hardest kind of grief, mourning people who are still alive." Diana reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You did the right thing, Ren. You saved yourself." After dinner, they sat by the fireplace sipping wine as the storm softened into mist. They watched old home videos on Diana's tablet. Max as a child, running through sprinklers, his laughter echoing through the room. For a moment, Renate's chest tightened with the old ache, but it wasn't as sharp as before. Time had dulled it into something bearable, almost tender. When Diana finally went to bed, Renate stayed up a little longer. She walked to the window, looking out at the glistening streetlights reflected in puddles. Her reflection in the glass looked older, yes, but also stronger. A woman who had finally learned that love without respect is just dependency dressed up as devotion. She whispered softly, "I forgive you, Max, but I won't forget." Then she turned off the lights and let the sound of distant thunder carry her into the calmest sleep she'd had in years. Sunday morning broke clear and golden after the night's rain. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, lighting up the tiny droplets still clinging to the glass. Renate woke before her sister, her body light with the kind of ease that only comes when you've stopped living in fear. She brewed coffee, the smell rich and grounding, and opened the back door to let the warm air drift in. The garden was alive, earth dark and fragrant, roses glistening. She stepped outside barefoot, feeling the damp ground beneath her toes, and thought about how many years she'd ignored small pleasures like this. She'd once believed peace was something that arrived after everyone else was happy. Now she knew better. Peace was something you built, piece by piece, like a home. Diana joined her on the porch, still in her robe, hair wild from sleep. "You're up early," she said, stretching. "Old habits," Renate said with a soft smile, "but I don't mind mornings anymore." Diana sipped her coffee and nodded toward the canvas leaning against the wall. "You painted that?" "I did, yesterday. It's not much." "It's beautiful," her sister said simply. They spent the morning tending to the garden together, trimming, watering, pulling weeds that had crept through after the rain. Each motion felt deliberate, cleansing. As they worked, Renate realized she wasn't just reclaiming her house, she was reclaiming herself. By noon, the sun was warm and high. They set up a small table outside and had lunch. Sandwiches, lemonade, laughter. For the first time in years, the sound of another person's voice in her home didn't feel like intrusion. It felt like companionship. Later that afternoon, they decided to drive to the coast. The ocean had always been Renate's favorite place. Endless, forgiving, alive. They stood at the edge of the shore, wind whipping their hair, salt clinging to their lips. "Do you ever think about going back?" Diana asked. Renate shook her head slowly. "Back to what? The woman I was doesn't exist anymore." She watched the waves roll in, crashing and retreating. "I used to think love meant sacrifice. Now I think love means truth. And the truth is, I was dying trying to keep them comfortable." They walked in silence for a while, the tide washing over their feet, cold and exhilarating. A group of children ran past them, chasing each other with plastic buckets, their laughter cutting through the sound of the sea. It reminded Renate of Max, of the way that he used to laugh when he was small, before life and greed had hardened him. "I still hope he finds his way," she said softly, "but I can't be his compass anymore." Diana slipped her arm around her. "You already gave him everything he needed. The rest is his choice." As the sun began to set painting the sky in pinks and golds. Renate took a deep breath of salt air. The wind tugged at her hair, the waves whispered against the sand, and she felt, for the first time, truly part of the world again, not standing on the outside looking in. When they drove home in the dark, the road winding beneath the stars, she thought of how far she had come, from fear to defiance, from pain to peace. And somewhere between the ocean and her quiet street, Renate realized something profound. Survival was never the end of her story. It was only the beginning.
Monday came softly, wrapped in the pale gold of early light. Renate woke to the gentle rhythm of the world, birds calling from the oak tree outside, the faint whistle of the kettle on the stove. Diana was still asleep in the guest room, and for once, the house felt full in a way that wasn't heavy or tense. She poured herself a cup of coffee and sat by the window, the same spot where she used to stare out, waiting for bad news. Now she simply watched the light shift across her garden. The roses she'd trimmed 2 days ago were already blooming again, stubborn, beautiful, alive. She smiled. After breakfast, she wandered into her small art room, once Ethan's childhood bedroom, and opened the curtains wide. On the easel sat the painting she'd started before Diana's visit. She touched the edge of the canvas, feeling the faint texture of dried paint beneath her fingertips. She added a few strokes, a line of gold where the light broke through the clouds, and stood back to look. The painting wasn't just rain anymore, it was rebirth. By late morning, Diana emerged, her hair a wild halo. "You're up early again," she said with a yawn. "I don't sleep late anymore," Renate said with a small smile. "Feels like I might miss something if I do." "Miss what?" Renate gestured toward the window. "This, the world, finally being kind again." They decided to drive into town for lunch. At the cafe, the waitress, a young woman with pink hair and too much eyeliner, recognized Renate from a few visits back. "The usual?" she asked cheerfully. Renate laughed. "Already have a usual? That's progress." "Sure is," Diana teased. "Look at you, a local again." They ate slowly, talking about nothing in particular: books, recipes, a possible trip to the mountains in the fall. It was simple conversation, but for Renate, it was everything. She no longer measured her life by what she'd lost, but by the moments she was choosing to keep. After lunch, they stopped by a small bookstore. Renate wandered through the aisles until her fingers brushed across a title she hadn't seen in years: The Road Back to Yourself. She smiled at the coincidence and bought it without hesitation. When they returned home, the afternoon light was fading, turning the sky a soft amber. Diana packed her things slowly, reluctant to leave. "I'll come back soon," she promised, hugging her sister tight. "You're glowing, Ren. I've never seen you like this." Renate chuckled. "That's what peace looks like, apparently." After Diana left, the house grew quiet again, but not empty. Renate poured herself a glass of wine, went out to the porch, and opened the book. The pages smelled of new paper and promise. Halfway through the first chapter, she closed it, letting her gaze drift toward the horizon. Fireflies began to blink in the distance, small lights flickering like memories finding their way home. She thought of all that had happened, of pain that once defined her, and the courage that had slowly erased it. Then, softly, she said to herself, "This isn't what's left of my life. This is the beginning of it." And as the first stars broke through the dusk, Renate leaned back in her chair, the wind warm on her skin, the night open and infinite before her. Tuesday brought with it a rare kind of stillness,
Not silence, but calm. The kind of quiet that feels earned. Renata woke to sunlight spilling across her sheets, the faint hum of a lawnmower somewhere in the distance, and the smell of damp earth after the night's light drizzle. She lay there for a moment, her hand resting over her heart, feeling its steady rhythm. There had been a time when even that had felt uncertain. Not anymore. After breakfast, she checked her email. There was a message from a local art gallery, the same one where she'd left a few of her small paintings last month. Her pulse quickened as she opened it. The curator had written, "We'd love to feature your Rain series in our summer showcase. Your work has something honest." Renee smiled, her fingers trembling slightly over the keyboard before typing a simple reply. "I'd be honored." She sat back, stunned for a moment by how far she'd come. A year ago, she could barely look at her own reflection without flinching at the memory of who she'd been. Now she was building something new, something that was entirely her own. By midday, she decided to drive out to the lake. It wasn't far, just a short stretch of winding road lined with wildflowers and tall pines. The air smelled clean, sharp with pine sap and water. She parked by the edge and walked down to the dock, her sandals in one hand, the boards warm beneath her feet. The surface of the lake was glassy, reflecting the sky like a promise. She could hear children laughing somewhere across the shore and the soft whir of a boat engine in the distance. She sat down at the end of the dock, letting her feet dangle into the cool water. For a long while, she just breathed. Deep, slow breaths that filled her lungs with life. She thought of Max, of how broken their bond had become, and of Ethan, whose voice she hadn't heard in months. The ache was still there, faint but real, yet it didn't consume her anymore. It existed alongside her peace, no longer in place of it. Her phone buzzed beside her, a text from an unknown number. She opened it and froze. "Hi, Mom. It's Ethan." Her heart stuttered. She hadn't seen his name appear on her screen in almost a year. "I heard about the divorce. I'm sorry it got so bad. I've been doing some thinking, and I'd like to come visit, if that's okay." She reread the message 3 times, her throat tightening. Then she smiled through tears she didn't bother to wipe away. "Of course it's okay. I'd love that, sweetheart." She set the phone down beside her and looked out across the lake. The sun had shifted lower now, shimmering off the ripples like liquid gold. She imagined Ethan walking through her front door, taller maybe, older, but still her boy. She didn't know what kind of man he'd become, but she was ready to find out, without judgment, without fear. As the evening deepened and the sky turned violet, Renee whispered into the quiet, "Thank you." She wasn't sure to whom, God, fate, herself, but it didn't matter. Gratitude didn't need direction. When she finally drove home, she felt lighter than she had in years. Life wasn't finished with her yet. In fact, it was just beginning to open its doors again. Wednesday morning was bright and still, the air heavy with the scent of summer blooming. Renee woke early, long before Ethan's message could feel like a dream. For a moment, she just lay there, the quiet hum of her house wrapping around her like a soft blanket. She thought of the words she'd sent the night before. "I'd love that, sweetheart," and the quiet weight of what they meant. Forgiveness, not of him, but of everything that had been. By noon, she was in the kitchen, humming faintly as she cooked. She wasn't nervous, not exactly, more curious, like someone opening an old book to find what kind of story the pages had turned into. She baked his favorite lemon pie, the same one she used to make when he was little and scraped his knees. It had been years since her home had carried that smell. Around 3, she heard the crunch of tires on the gravel drive. Her breath caught. Through the window, she saw a car pull up, silver, clean, unfamiliar, and then a man step out. For a heartbeat, her mind went blank. He was taller, broader, but when he smiled, it was her son. "Hi, Mom," Ethan said, his voice softer than she remembered. Renate opened the door and, without thinking, pulled him into a hug. He stiffened, just for a second, then melted into it, his arms tight around her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. When she finally stepped back, her eyes glistened, but her smile stayed steady. "You look well," she said. "So do you," he replied, glancing around the house. "It's different." "It's mine now," she said simply. They sat in the kitchen, the pie cooling between them. Conversation came awkwardly at first, half sentences and long pauses, but slowly, laughter found its way back in. Ethan told her about his new job, his small apartment in Portland, the friends he'd made. He didn't mention Ashley, and Renee didn't ask. At one point, he looked down, twisting his fork in his hand. "I should have called sooner. I didn't know how." Renee reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. She said, "You just did." For the first time in a very long while, the heaviness between them lifted. Later, they walked through the garden together. The air was warm, bees drifting lazily from flower to flower. Ethan stopped by the rosebush and smiled faintly. "Dad planted these," he said. "He did," Renate said, "but I'm the one who kept them alive." As the sun began to set, the sky deepened into shades of amber and rose. They sat on the porch in silence, watching the world settle. Ethan leaned back, eyes half closed. "You seem happy," he said. "I am, not because everything is perfect, because I finally let it be imperfect." He nodded slowly, a faint smile touching his lips. "I think I understand that now." When the stars began to bloom overhead, Ethan stood to leave. He hugged her again, longer this time, steadier. He said, "I'll come back soon." "I'll hold you to that," she whispered. After his car disappeared down the road, Renate stayed on the porch, the night soft around her. Fireflies blinked across the garden, and in the distance, the faint sound of laughter floated from a neighbor's yard. She closed her eyes, breathing in the scent of roses and summer air. Her life, once shattered, now felt like a mosaic, imperfect pieces rearranged into something whole and quietly beautiful. And as the wind rustled through the trees, Renate smiled to herself. The story wasn't about loss anymore. It was about becoming.